Greetings, my name is Danielle Palli, and in addition to being a positive psychology and mindfulness coach, I am also a multi-genre author and book coach, and this is part 2 in a 2-part video series on memoir writing. So when people are coming to me writing their memoir, they've often gone through some trauma, some things that happened in the past that they've worked through, and now they want to share these life lessons to help others. The problem is sometimes their descriptions get stuck where they can see the description, they can feel what happened, they have all the emotions, the entanglement, it's vivid in their mind. But maybe when they've recounted the story, it's more like a diary or journal of what happened. So they can read that journal entry and it all comes back to them. But for you, the reader, you might not get a sense of what they're really feeling in that moment. So it's about bringing the reader into the experience so they can feel like they're actually there. It's a bit like when you tell someone you've had this awesome dream and you wake up and you're excited and you're like, this happened and this happened. And then I said this and then they did this. And the person you're telling it to is like, yeah, that's not interesting at all. It's interesting because you experienced it, but unless they're in that dream with you, they're not getting it. So this can be a struggle when somebody is telling their story. The old adage, show, don't tell. You want to tell a little bit, but you also want to show through dialogue, through description, through the actions that are happening. So I'm going to give you a writing suggestion. It's an exercise that you might try. It's also a really good mindfulness exercise. It actually has nothing to do with writing your book. It can be a scene that is independent, that is just for practice. The exercise is going out and doing a little bit of people watching for about 10, 15 minutes. And when you're there, you're going to pay special attention to all the minute details. Now, it might be that you take a few notes while you're there just so you can go back and write it more extensively later. But I want you to observe using all your senses. And here are some of the things we're thinking about. Number one, if people are around you and they're talking, imagine as if they were characters in a story. What are they saying and how are they saying it? So what's the cadence in their voice and how would you describe it in a scene? For example, does one person have this gravelly, husky voice and choke out certain words that are barely understandable? Does another talk in these high-pitched chirp-like sounds? Maybe they talk really fast for a while and then it slows down. Does it sound as if they're singing? And what are their personalities like? What can you learn about them from their body language? Do they seem really aloof? Are they really engaged with what's happening around them? What are they wearing? What are the textures of the outfits? How would you describe this very, very flowy, colorful shirt that I'm wearing? Notice if their gestures or hands make other specific movements, like I use my hands a lot when I'm talking. And what do you see, hear, smell, taste, if applicable, around you? What do you feel physically? And this might be as much as closing your eyes and hearing, or if you're someplace where there's food cooking, even closing your eyes and just smelling and noticing what you smell. When you've taken it in with each of the senses, try writing a scene in as much detail as you can, even if you think it's overkill using all your senses, because you can always edit it back later. And then finally, particularly with memoirs, you want people to understand how you're feeling. So you also can use this as an exercise to see if you can perceive the emotions of the people around you. And then do a check-in and notice what emotions are you feeling. Now, can you describe those emotions without actually naming it? Right? So instead of saying, I'm bored, you might write, I twirled the cherry in my drink by the stem listlessly, fighting back a yawn. That's just one example. So how can you describe these emotions without saying, I felt happy, I felt sad? What are you doing and how are you acting to demonstrate those feelings? Now, this might be an awful lot to start. So feel free to break down this exercise into 3 separate parts. Part 1 could be simply writing down the dialogue of what is being said. And if you decide to get creative with it, maybe what they said was not all that interesting. And so you might change it a little bit if you choose to. Again, this is just an experiment. And after you've got that dialogue, maybe you go back and add a little action of what people are doing and kind of thread some more actionable items in there. And then you might go back and describe these people a little bit more detail. What are they wearing? How are they moving through the scene? And then finally, you might go through that piece a third time, and this time you're adding that emotional component into it. Now, if that's too much, you can try another third activity. So one is trying to do everything at once in a scene and seeing how it goes. And if you're a seasoned writer, that might be perfectly comfortable for you. The second is paying attention first to dialogue, then to action, then to description, then to emotion, and layer upon layer of the same text. And the third one, if you really want to hone in on one particular area or another, is just focus on the dialogue. And then start over again and just write about the scene using all your senses. And starting over again, just write about the scene, but the focus is on the emotional component. So play around, see how it goes. And as always, the more you write, the better you get at it. Nobody starts off being a good writer any more than they start off playing a musical instrument well or speaking a language well. It takes fine-tuning and fine-tuning. And I've been writing for a long time, and I can tell you that I'm constantly refining the process. Thanks for joining me.